Hello and welcome to a whole new set of videos about my Ferrari Mondeo here. Now you might be wondering, if you've watched any of my videos before, how I've gone and afforded this. You might be wondering what it is, and you might be wondering why I've done this. Now I'm kind of hoping that by the end of the video I might have figured that out for myself too, because I still don't know at the moment. I'm still in a sense of shell shock about what I've gone and done. Anyhow, I hope this video is going to be moderately interesting or useful, and if it is, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks very much. Okay, it's 9:30 in the morning and I've driven hours to get here, 3 hours, and I'm just about to drive around the corner and look at this Ferrari. And yeah, I'm feeling really nervous. I've got terrible buyer's remorse. I've had it since yesterday. It's because it's a lot of money. It's going to put me in a little bit of a position. It might be a little bit too much money I've spent actually on the car as well. But yeah, I'm really feeling quite stupid at the moment, and it's not a pleasant feeling. So I've just got to hope that I've got everything right and just knuckle on through. That's basically it, all it is, isn't it? Anyhow, so I've loaded up the car. I'm on my way home now. It's getting quite late as well and quite dark, and I've got to unload the car on my own, which I'm used to. I've got past some of my buyer's remorse now. I still feel a little bit sort of strained about the whole thing, and I am quite nervous about my financial position. But it is nice to be past the worst of the buyer's remorse. Obviously, picking up the car, you suddenly notice all the little bits you've got to do. You're suddenly aware of this huge responsibility or task that you've taken on. You suddenly see all the nuts and bolts that need replacing, all the little bits of paintwork that need that little bit of detailing and finishing, all the little jobs you've got to do, and you start, it can feel like a tidal wave of stress and problems that you've just taken on, and that you've suddenly have become your problem rather than someone else's problem. So that is a very stressful point, but I'm feeling generally a lot better about it now. It helps that everyone keeps on coming along whenever I stop and say, oh, what's that? Oh, that's a nice car. So that sort of thing helps a bit as well. So yes, the how question. How did I end up with this? Well, as anyone who's watched my previous videos will know, I'm not exactly swimming in cash. I'm a civil servant. There is no bonuses, there is no promotions, there is no thank yous or even a pat on the back. In fact, the Daily Mail loves to just trounce you as if you're some kind of hideous leech on the butt of society. So how have I managed to do this? Well, the simple answer is a loan. So yes, I've taken a loan for £25,000. It's a personal loan. It's surprisingly easy and quick to arrange. Literally about half an hour, a few details, and if your credit record's okay, 3 or 4 hours later, you've got 25 grand sat in your account. And that is really quite worrying, isn't it? It's also worrying how quick you can chuck the 25 grand out of your account to someone else. Although I must say, I had terrible trouble at the bank today, because, not a complaint by the way, but they had all their fraud thing going on, and they were asking me all these questions and going, oh yes, it's good you've actually checked the car and you've made sure that it exists and you've looked at it and know that it's roadworthy. And I'm like, bruh. Anyhow, yeah, so the loan, £25,000 over 5 years. It's 6% interest, and I got it from Tesco's. Somewhere between the frozen line and the kitchen tower, I think it was. Anyway, so over 5 years, the interest is going to be, oh, nice little deer. Over 5 years, the interest is going to be about 3,800, I think it was, if you let it run to term. Now, I doubt very much if I'm going to let it run to term, because I think within maybe a year, I'm going to be struggling. And that might mean that I have to sell this. I'm really hoping not. But the reality is I think I've overstretched myself. I'll know more in the next couple of months, so we'll see. But yeah, so I can overpay the loan, and that will reduce the interest costs. Or I can just pay the whole loan off once I've sold something like a kidney. I've got a spare kidney. They're worth a few quid, ain't they? Mine might be a bit knackered because apparently I don't drink enough water. But must be worth something to someone. So the repayments per month are about £481 a month, which is a bit nerve-wracking because that's quite close to how much disposable income I actually have at the end of every month. So yes, I'm going to have to rein in and hope that nothing breaks. So yeah, I am quite nervous. I do think I've overstretched myself. But that's the how anyway. The what? Well, it's a Ferrari Mondial. Ah, stupid boy. So the history behind this car is a little bit different. It was originally delivered to Belgium, Garage Franco-Champs, I think it was, and then almost immediately imported by the Maranello concessionaires in Egham in London, the same people who imported my Maserati. The first owner had the car for a few months before he part exchanged it with the second owner for a 355. So the second owner had a 355 and swapped it for this car because basically he needed 4 seats. It is actually a pretty practical car. Those rear seats are actually reasonably okay to sit in, if not very comfortable. You can even fit a Pope in it, look. Now the second owner took the car to Spain, where unfortunately had a bit of an accident on the way to the hairdressers and crashed the car. Now this particular car has a very rare automatic clutch system called the Valeos system. And while they were trying to repair the car, the crash damage, unfortunately they broke this system, and it was so rare that there wasn't really any expertise around to fix it. So it just seemed to sit around in Spain for a long time before being repatriated back to the UK in 2007. Then the owner's house where the Ferrari was now being stored got compulsory purchase for the building of a high-speed railway network, a massive mess in the UK that really messed a lot of things up. So the Ferrari basically then sat for another bunch of years waiting to be fixed. Then the car was finally sold to the person I bought it from in 2022, and he installed a manual clutch system so at last the car could be driven, and he did a number of other jobs before deciding he had too many projects and sold it to me. So what all this means is this 32-year-old car has essentially spent the last 29 years off the road. It's only ever done 3,000 miles and it's never even had an MOT. So I'm hoping I'm finally going to be the guy who gets this car back on the road driving again. So this Monda has the Valeo automatic clutch system, and this makes it a really, really rare car. There was only between something like about 26 and 40 of these cars made, and there was one Ferrari Testarossa and one F40 that were made for Gianni Agnelli, who apparently had a leg injury and couldn't really operate the clutch very well, and therefore Ferrari basically made him these cars because he owned like half the company. So yeah, this is a really rare system. So here are the 3 main components for the Valeo system, and it is just these 3. You've got this modified pedal box here, which has no clutch pedal. You've got the brain, which is a very 80s looking ECU unit here. And then you've got this very fancy actuator that sits on top of the gearbox. Actually sits on top of the gearbox and links directly to the clutch fork. Now the way this thing works is you're sat there, you go to move into first gear, you find that there's no clutch pedal and you go, oh my God, and then you remember you're in a Valeo car. As you start to move that gear lever down into first gear, it's a Ferrari, so gated shift, you go down into first gear. It keeps on confusing me too. Basically, there's a little sensor there that picks up that movement has started. The ECU gets that sensor reading and immediately disengages the clutch within 0.2 seconds. So it's a really, really fast, cool unit. So it disengages that clutch and lets you get into first gear. Now, of course, it doesn't then re-engage the clutch because otherwise you jerk forward into something in front or you'd smash into your garage or something like that. So it holds the clutch disengaged even though you're in first gear. And then my understanding is that as you then release the brake and start to apply the throttle, a little bit like a little twist and go moped, then it will sense that that's happening and it will start to re-engage the clutch to get that biting point and start the car moving. So that's pretty fancy, and I don't quite know how it works without stalling the car, how it gets that biting point sensitivity in 80s computer electronics, but apparently it does it very well. They even had a Top Gear video on it. Not Jeremy Clarkson, someone far prettier, and even though it was like late 80s, they had better hair than him back then. You know, even during all that craziness that went on in the 80s. Not that I remember it, I'm 25 years old, so, but I've seen it on TV, you know. And you had crazy things like cassette discs? No, CD-ROM or CDs or something like that. I don't know any of that. I'm a millennial, really, honestly. Yeah. Anyway, so then as you start moving and you go up into second gear, what happens is as you start to move that gear lever out of first gear, again, the ECU gets that signal, immediately disengages in the clutch in that 0.2 seconds. You get it into second gear, it senses it's gone into second gear fully, and then it re-engages this clutch. And apparently this means you can do really fancy things like really, really fast gear changes. You can use your left foot on the brake and your right foot on the throttle. You know, you can not really let off the throttle between gear changes. It will do some of that sort of balancing for you. So it's apparently a really cool system. And I believe it was they started using it on the Lancia rally cars. I think that's where it originated. But yeah, so this is the forerunner of all those F1 gearboxes and, you know, that you have in the 360 Ferraris and all that sort of stuff. But apparently it was a really reliable system. The problem is it would go in for service, people wouldn't know how to put it on the SD1 system, they'd make some change, you know, and then it would upset the system. So the issue of my Valeo system is in the ECU here. Basically, there is something wrong in some of the circuit board here, and that is what kept the car off the road essentially for about 28 years. It's all fairly straightforward electronics. There's nothing overly complicated in there, and I do have the schematics, so I'm really hoping that I can look into this and get it working one day. But because the car is currently working, the actuator's been fitted, for now, my priority is just to get the car running and get it usable. In the future, if I can come back and get this actually fully working and return her to being a proper Valeo, then that would be really fantastic. So what needs doing on this car to get it back to its glory? Obviously it's a project car and there's a number of tasks I need to do. My first task is going to be trying to get it through the MOT, because that way I'll have something, I'll have like a quick win, I'll have something that I can drive, I'll have something that I can enjoy. And on that old motivation curve, when you start to lose your enthusiasm, by getting it back on the road, I can get some of that enthusiasm back in, use the car a little bit, make it useful, and then do a bit more of a rolling restoration. So to get it through MOT, I'm going to have to go firstly through each wheel station. The brake's all nice and free and working, but what I could really do with doing is taking the wheels off, cleaning up those brakes, looking at the suspension bushes. The suspension bushes on this, if they are gone, are relatively cheap. They're not Maserati territory and they're quite easy to change. But I've got to check all that's all okay. I've got to put braided stainless steel pipes on, but I'll flush all the fluid through and that will get those into really good operating condition for the MOT. The next task is, which is a big MOT failure, is this windscreen's got a massive crack in it. So I'm going to have to get that changed, and it's looking like it's going to be a little bit of an interesting job because I know this trim round here is very expensive and almost unattainable, so I'm going to have to carefully prise that off before the windscreen fitter gets here. Another crazy sort of job I've got to do really is that every seat belt is locked and not working properly. And I've actually looked into this and found that the gear has just got a little bit of corrosion on each seat belt, which is stopping it from either pulling out properly or locking properly. So I'm going to have to go through each seat belt and do that. Luckily, I can fix those and it's a zero cost item, which is good because it's really difficult to get parts for this car. And when you can get parts, the prices are horrendous. Now, once I've done those seat belts, one of the biggest jobs I have to do to get it for MOT is actually not an MOT job. And that is I've got to change the cam belt. This car's done 3,000 miles. The cam belt is now very old. I believe it might have been changed in 2012 when they started thinking about trying to get it back on the road again. But if it was done, that would now be 13 years old. So obviously, if the cam belt goes, the engine's toast, or going to be a horrendous job to fix. So I don't really want to start the engine anymore. I just want to get those cam belts done before I start the engine up again. The cam belt on this is typically an engine out job, but there is a way to remove the fuel tank and jack her up enough that you can get underneath and change it from underneath the car. And then it's not particularly any worse a job than doing the Volvo's cam belt. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a tricky one. I might try and get the engine out because these were designed to have the engine taken out relatively easily. And a number of the things that might normally be a bit of a pain, like doing the air conditioning, isn't a problem because there's no gas in the air conditioning system. So some of those things don't need to be done. I need to bleed the brakes, so disconnecting the brakes aren't a problem. So I'll have a look. I've got an engine crane, I've got ramps. Maybe I can just lift her up enough, you know, in the garage and just slide that engine out. Have to have a look at that one. The final job back here to do is a little bit weird and a little bit annoying in some ways. And that is, she doesn't seem to have any catalytic converters. Now, she's of an age where she should have had catalytic converters when she was built, but it was also the age where they were crossing over. And I'm not sure if it was delivered with catalytic converters and someone's taken them off, or if it was just on the last of the production line and they basically never fitted them and it was never picked up because she never had an MOT. Luckily, catalytic converters for this are not too much money. They're about 100 quid each and I need 2. I can go down the route of getting standard catalytic converters from a UK manufacturer, which are apparently okay-ish, they last a few years, or I can get some higher quality sport cats and actually weld those in. They don't need type approval because of the age of the car. So if I go down that route, all I have to do is take my link pipes up, cut them, weld in the cat, and I'm done. And they'll be sports cats as well, so they won't restrict that exhaust too much or the noise too much. So that will get her through MOT all those jobs, hopefully. But I will still have a number of other things that I need to do to bring this car back to its sort of former glory, if you like. And if you look in here, one of the things I'm missing from that light crash she had nearly 30 years ago is the spare wheel carrier. And it's a big glass fiber tub that fits in here. You can get a new one from Maranello. They have them in stock for £1,000. Maranello is the parts supplier for Ferraris in the UK, the official parts suppliers. So yes, I can get that wheel carrier. It's £1,000. It's painful. I'll see. I might be able to find one second hand for 500–600, but they're typically cracked and stuff like that. So I'll have a look. The next thing is I need an under tray. The under tray on these are over £2,000, and it's just a piece of glass fiber, and that is intensely painful. The problem is though, is they're not available. So even if I had £2,000 to spend on it, there's just none in the world available. I might be able to find one in the States, but again, it would be a horrendous amount of money for something that's probably secondhand, cracked, damaged. So I think I'm going to make that under tray myself out of some aluminium sheet that I've got left over from the Ford. Another thing I need to do, which is a fairly simple job, is I just need to do some paint correction. So it's been partly resprayed in places because it sat underneath covers for a while when the whole HS2 craziness was going on. There's just a few little bits and pieces I could do just correcting. I've got a small spray gun in the garage with all the correct filters, so I'll have to get some red paint and just go over a couple of bits and pieces and do that slight paint correction. But then the last real job that she really needs, other than general cleaning, a few switches freeing up and stuff like that, is the hood is completely gone. Underneath this lovely tonneau cover, this hood is completely, it's just wrecked. Now, a new hood from Ferrari is like 3,500 quid, but a company in America makes them for about 800 quid, and they're apparently quite good hoods. So that's what I'm gonna do. So about 750, 800 pounds delivered for a nice new hood. Takes a little bit of time to fit it, but it's not too much of an issue and should be quite a nice job. Obviously, I live in the UK, so you could say that that's low priority if you lived in California or Florida, but living in the UK, it comes up the priority scale quite a bit because, you know, you go out on a nice hot sunny day and you think, oh, this is lovely, and then it tips down with rain, and then before you know where you are, you've got to try and protect your thing, or you're hiding in a petrol station or something, drinking lots of coffee to justify leaving the car underneath the canopy there or something. So that's all she really needs. So it's not the most biggest project in the world. It's not a huge amount of work. The slight problem I've got though is that I am overextended cash wise. So a lot of these parts I've got to delay the purchase of. So to get her for MOT, I think I've got enough money for the parts that I need, the stainless steel braided brake lines, the cam belts and stuff. So if I just space them out a little bit, I can get her for MOT, but then the big ticket items like the hood and that spare wheel carrier, that can wait till a little bit later on when my finances have recovered. So almost at the end of the video, and at the start of this video, I set out to answer 3 simple questions. The first one was, how have I done this? And obviously the answer to that is this massive loan that is causing me some concern and making me doubt my own sanity somewhat. The second question was, what is it? And how come I've particularly chosen this type of car? And well, it's a Ferrari Mondial and it's a project car, and it requires a number of things that I need to do to make it a good car and get it back on the road, which is always a nice thing to try and achieve, to try and transform something into something great. The third part of the question was, why have I chosen to do this now? And I kind of hoped I'd have some amazing purposeful reason for you that by the end of this video, and yet I'm struggling to come up with a logical answer to the concept of why. But perhaps that's partly the point of life, is that perhaps you don't always need to justify why. Perhaps the whole point of life is to say, why not? Why'd you climb the mountain? Because it's there. Why'd you do anything in life? I mean, we're here for a limited period of time on this planet. And if you think about it, by the time you get to the end of your time on the planet, you hope to have some nice achievements, you hope to have some nice memories, and you hope to have ticked off a few things from the bucket list. And I guess in that answer, that makes a lot of sense as to why I've done this, because this is certainly something I always wanted to have. I remember playing top trumps when I was a kid. Actually, the Ferrari Mondial in top trumps was actually the worst card you could get, because it was the Mondial 8. The Mondial 8 was a very nice car, but obviously you couldn't beat a Lamborghini Countach with a Mondial 8. I wonder if that's partly why some people have a bit of a negative reaction to them, actually. It's all because of what they remember from when they were a kid playing top trumps. But yeah, so it's difficult to come up with a proper reason as to why. I mean, in some ways you should resist the temptation to justify your actions. When people say, why have you done that? You should say, why not, fish face? Get lost, my life. That's probably a better response, because otherwise, as I say, you do get trapped into this need to justify your actions all the time, which is just not a very nice way to live. But I suppose there is one other little bit of an inkling of a feeling that I had while I was looking at this car and while I was making my decision. And my decision was quite a sort of drawn out but not really well thought through one. But this other sort of feeling I had was basically that I suddenly realized that on a school morning, when I'm trying to get my boy out the door and get him to school, I could turn around to him and I could say, my boy, which car shall we take, the Ferrari or the Maserati? And I just thought that sounded cool. And yeah, I don't know. I could come up with a million reasons or no reasons at all why I got this, but that little thought of being able to make that sentence stick in the morning, that's a really stupid reason, I know. Anyhow, I hope this video has been mildly interesting or entertaining. I hope it's made some sort of sense to some of you. If it has, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you thought I've been a complete idiot and it's been a complete waste of your time watching this video, then please blast me in the comments and tell me how stupid I am. I'll enjoy reading those comments. So, thanks very much for watching, and have a great day.